everybody. What is going on? Happy Tuesday, and welcome to Grinderslive on RotoGrinders.com. I'm Eric Crin, and I'm joined by my Cardinals buddy. We're going to talk some Cardinals today. Justin Van Zin. Justin, how are we doing on this beautiful Tuesday?
Oh, we're doing okay. We still got baseball for now, so I guess we can roll with it. I know that, it's just in the back of my mind of what happened with basketball, and a night we were on the air that night, and then basketball went downhill there that night in mid-March. So hopefully we don't have a similar outcome with baseball. I personally think it's a long shot that the season continues without interruption, but that's the pessimist in me, I suppose. But for tonight, for daily fantasy, the good news is we only have to worry about tonight. I cannot fathom running a season-long fantasy baseball league at this point, but we don't have to worry about that here. So it's a great day.
Yeah, you run the season-long league and you're done in 8 days. Like whoever wins the first week just wins then, right?
The person who wins the first week will be happy with that ruling, I guess. But the other 11 or 13 or however many owners probably would not be so pleased.
Yeah, I would personally fight for, the person who was leading after week one to be the champion if I was that person. Otherwise, I would probably fight against it. I would 100% be selfish in that.
Most people are. That's the way it goes in the gambling space for sure. So I don't think that other first place owners wouldn't be in the same boat as you.
Yeah, but I'm definitely gonna get crap. They're gonna say, "Oh, how could you? You're not. You would just want to, even it out for everybody, keep it fair." Blah blah blah. No, I'm taking first place. I can get it. So you mentioned, of course, for those of you who've been living under a rock, the Marlins are going to be gone for at least at least a week, and then the mayor of Miami came out and said that if they're going to come back, they need to quarantine for 14 days. I don't know what the Marlins are going to do. I really have no idea what to expect from the Marlins. The Phillies series that got canceled suddenly. The Yankees are playing the Orioles this weekend. It's a bit of a mess, Justin, and I feel like you kind of mentioned this before. I feel like it's going to get worse, but like you said, that's why we play daily. That's why we're sitting around, playing just tonight, so we don't have to worry about what happens in a month. If in a month we have baseball, great, and if not, that is okay. We do have baseball tonight, and it's another slate tonight where we have got not quite as many awful pitching options, but it's not like we're sitting here looking at opening day rosters. Walker Buehler, he's essentially unplayable tonight because he's only going to go 3 or 4 innings. And then after that, it's Kyle Gibson. It's Jeff Samardzija. It gets ugly really quick here, Justin. What are you doing at the pitcher position tonight?
Yeah, I don't know really. To be honest with you, I mean, it's about as bad as what we saw last night. I guess maybe a little better, but you said Buehler's unplayable. I agree. We've got his projected ownership at 27% on DraftKings right now. I do think you will see people play him, and I think that's a mistake. He's only going to go 3 or 4 innings, and he's on the road against the best offense or one of the best offenses in baseball. So I don't see why you would pay the premium. I mean, he's $11,300 on DraftKings. I don't see why you would pay the premium for Buehler when you're only, you've got a 5-inning ceiling without question. I think in the last inter-squad game that he pitched, or maybe it was an exhibition, I can't remember if it was against an opposing team or his own team, but he only threw 2 innings. So it makes no sense to pay up for Buehler tonight. So he's off the table, and there are no other starters of top 2 in the rotation quality for any team tonight. And so that makes it, that's what's part of what's going to give Buehler some ownership, but it also makes it really challenging. Are you paying $10K for Merrill Kelly on DraftKings? You're paying $9,700 for Kyle Gibson. It's all relative, but I think, perhaps the answer tonight is just to go cheap and load up the bats. The guy who won the $66 entry fee tournament on DraftKings for $50K had Mike Foltynewicz, who was the most expensive pitcher on the board and scored negative points.
That's impressive.
So, you hit all the bats on a night where there's a ton of home runs, which is what that person did last night. It doesn't matter what you got in the pitching spots if none of the pitchers are scoring a ton of points. So why not just go cheap? I mean, he did it with Foltynewicz as the most expensive pitcher, which is even more impressive. I don't think you're going to see that again. I mean, there's going to be somebody in these cheaper ranges that score 20 fantasy points or 30 on FanDuel or something like that. And that's who you're going to need to have tonight. I don't think there's a must-have guy. I think it's a nice night to diversify in your GPP lineups because, you know, the guy that the herd is going to isn't any great shakes above the rest by any means.
So you mentioned, Walker Buehler. We're not going to mess with him. Kyle Gibson, maybe he's the thing. I like Jeff Samardzija tonight, and that sort of explains what kind of slate this is because, well, Jeff Samardzija stinks. I'm just going to ask you about Samardzija because I really wanted to talk about him because I know that he's not good. I know that he was sort of scratched 3 different times, when we were looking at this slate in Los Angeles where they said, oh, we were never going to start him. And then he was going to start. I'm a little bit concerned about that. But it's still a pitcher pitching in San Francisco against a lineup that strikes out a lot. Am I being too simplistic here?
Well, not from the fact that, I mean, it's in San Francisco against a lineup that strikes out a lot. I think that that logic is sound. There were some concerns about his velocity and his arm, which were the same concerns that people had about Foltynewicz last night. And he got DFA'd before the end of the day. So I'm not trying to draw parallels to Samardzija by any means, but it is a risk. The unknown of him getting pushed back. The Padres do have 4 lefties in there tonight, though none of them are extreme power threats. So Samardzija has been tagged by lefty bats in the past, but the biggest power bats for the Padres, Tatis and Machado and Tommy Pham, all hit from the right side. So the matchup is good, and I'm just not super confident in Samardzija. I'd probably be overweight on him based on our ownership projections, but it's not like I would be looking to go all in with a guy who you don't know if they're just going to use him as an opener. The Giants have kind of embraced that philosophy a little bit. Are they only going to let him pitch 3 innings? We just don't know what they're going to do with Samardzija. So wouldn't go all in on him, but probably will be overweight.
If he only pitches like 2 or 3 innings, I'm going to be pissed. I will not be happy. If my lineups just go up in flames after 3 innings in the Padres game, especially when
they don't necessarily go up in flames if he only pitches 3 innings because it's not like there's a ton of aces on the slate. So, and people are going to be playing Buehler at the same amount of innings. So I don't think it torpedoes your lineups. And I'm looking to see, so Smiley pitched in the last game and only gave up 1 run, and they only let him throw 64 pitches. The game before that, Webb threw 70 pitches. And then I think in their opener, it was Cueto. And then the second game, they used kind of an opener and then a long reliever. Gaussman came in long relief. And now I'm going back to the opener. I'm going to see how many pitches they let Cueto throw. They let Cueto 63 pitches. So the highest pitch count that the Giants have let a starter throw so far is 70. And that's probably a good baseline for Samardzija, given the fact that he's gotten scratched twice. Again, it's all relative in the context of the slate, but I wouldn't expect him to throw more than 70 pitches.
What about our boy Carlos Martinez? We got to talk about Carlos Martinez because I'm sure you spent all off season reading the same reports I did that says that Carmar is back. Looked great in camp. He really dedicated himself to becoming a starter and becoming healthy in the offseason, which I know we've heard before. All right, I fully understand that that's something that in St. Louis we have heard a time or two. Against the Twins, though, I like this upside. I really do, especially at low ownership. Come on board with me on Carlos Martinez, Cards.
Yeah, I'm a little more on board there. I think, the Twins have a scary lineup. They've scored a bunch of runs already. It's all between the ears with Martinez. He looks terrible sometimes, and he lets bad calls get to him or one fielding mistake, and all of a sudden innings unravel. And when that happens, it's going to be bad news for him. He did get stretched out a little more. They played an exhibition against the Royals last week. He threw 4 innings in that game. So you're not out of the realm that they might let him go 5-6 innings. 80 pitches or so tonight, and go from there. I mean, they kind of let Flaherty go based on how he was throwing in the first game, and the Cardinals really haven't had a quick hook on their guys in the first few games. So I think his leash, so to speak, is a little bit longer than some of the other pitchers you have tonight. And another pitcher whose weakness is generally left-handed bats. And so, again, the Twins, their biggest power threats, guys like Cruz, Donaldson hit from the right side. They do have some lefties in there, Kepler, Rosario, that can do some damage. But if he can keep those guys off the bases, I think he could have a solid night tonight. But people see the matchup. The price tag's pretty high. Unsure about his innings. He hasn't started in a while. I understand the pause there, but I do think his ceiling is a little bit higher than some people are giving him credit for, particularly when you consider that the other, mid to high tier options we have tonight are low strikeout guys like Kyle Gibson and Homer Bailey and Zach Davies. And I mean, none of those guys are going to be all that exciting.
Zach Davies feels like maybe from a run prevention standpoint, the safest option to me. Yeah. Anytime somebody's facing the Giants in San Francisco, I'm going to have interest. Not a lot of strikeouts though with Davies. Low projected ownership, but it wouldn't surprise me if they let him throw, 5 innings. I don't hate the idea of playing Zach Davies as kind of a stabilizer, because on a slate where pitching, much like last night, is unlikely to win it for us, it feels to me like Zach Davies is perfectly fine today.
Yeah, Davies is fine. Like you mentioned, he's one of the stronger run prevention options on the board. The Padres have the Pirates have one of the lowest. I think that might be the lowest implied team total, right there with a couple of others kind of in that 4 point. Sorry, I got him backwards again. He plays for the Padres now. He's facing the Giants.
He's facing the Giants.
I had him on the old Brewers team facing the Pirates, but Pirates Giants, whichever weak offense he's facing, the opponent only has a 4.2 run implied team total. So good park to pitch in. Again, whether it's the Pirates in PNC or the Giants in San Francisco, whichever jersey he decides he wants to put on, I suppose he'll decide to be a Padre. But good matchup from a run prevention standpoint. Probably has a safe-ish floor, given the fact that he's probably going to go more innings than Buehler. Kind of feels gross paying a mid-level price tag for Zach Davies, but I don't mind it. I think he's a perfectly viable option. Like him a little bit better on multi-pitcher sites where you need to try to jam into. Having him as your only pitcher on FanDuel feels a little bit less exciting, but again, there's not a lot to love tonight.
Yeah, all these guys are not exciting. Like, you look at all these guys, and I'm not doing backflips over them. Patrick Sandoval. We got to talk about Chalky Patrick Sandoval, who's a guy that had some strikeout upside, not necessarily stressed out. He reminds me a lot of Josh James yesterday, and he actually has the same matchup as Josh James did yesterday. James, of course, incredibly chalky, led a lot of people down, giving up runs to the Mariners. I stacked the Mariners. They didn't quite score enough for me, though. But Patrick Sandoval, guy, we're looking at 35% ownership over on DraftKings, price down at 6.6K. What do you think about him? Because I guess he's fine, because these other arms down here are wildly unexciting.
They are. I mean, I think I prefer Lindblom if I'm picking between the two, just because he's cheaper. At least I'm using DK salaries. I would have to pull up FanDuel, but Sandoval 6,600 on DK. So you're getting a $1,500 discount. Lindblom all the way down at 5,100 in a favorable matchup against Pittsburgh. And this is a guy that showed pretty good stuff in the KBO. Now we know that the KBO is certainly a step down from the major leagues, but he was one of the best pitchers over there, and comes over to take on an offense that's in all aspects pretty underwhelming. Is another good matchup for run prevention, and he's only $5,100 on DraftKings. And you've got Colin Moran hitting cleanup, and Brian Reynolds and Phillip Evans and Guillermo Heredia. I mean, it's not a major league quality lineup that the Pirates are throwing out there outside of the top couple of guys, and Josh Bell and Frazier are fine, but it's not an elite offense that you need to be scared of, and he's the third cheapest pitcher on the board. So that is where I'm going, I guess, for my value over Sandoval, and then let you load up on the bats a little bit.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, not a team that's going to strike out a lot this year. Derek Shelton's really got that club. He is doing nothing but preaching, take pitches, take pitches, take pitches, foul pitches off. Like, he does not want these starters to get a lot of strikeouts. But for 5.1K, you don't need a ton of strikeouts. And it's not like any of these other names are going to be racking up a ton of Ks. Antonio Senzatella, 13% strikeout rate. Derek Collins stinks at baseball. Kyle Zimmer, no. Matt Hall, Ronnie Garcia, nope, nope, nope. I mean, these other names, I just can't do it. Justice Sheffield, he was a guy that was incredibly highly touted when he was coming up, I believe with the Yankees. And unfortunately, he gets a matchup tonight at the Angels, where he's a left-handed pitcher throwing against Trout, throwing against Rendon. I don't really want to mess with that. So you're kind of left with Sandoval and with Josh Lindblom down here. And I don't know, Zach. I'd rather play Zach Davies than Justice Sheffield. We should talk about, I don't know why we have to, but the Merrill Kelly, Kyle Gibson matchup. It's these guys stink, but I mean, they're in play. I think I will have lineups tonight where I am paying $10,000 for Merrill Kelly.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, you're not going to be the only one doing it too. The total in that game is 9, which is the lowest you're going to find tonight. A couple games at 9. It's ugly out there. Now, these guys have the benefit of being proven pitchers at the major league level, but it's not like the ceiling is all that high. And I mean, certainly I'm rostering them before I roster Bueller. But I mean, are you getting
it's just such a funny statement. I'm definitely rostering Merrill Kelly for 10K.
If this was a normal slate, if we were 3 weeks into the season, Walker Bueller would be like 70% owned tonight.
I would be over the field on Walker Bueller.
I mean, even against Houston, he would be owned. That's just the difference between his quality, the quality of his arm versus the other guys you have tonight. And it's, we can't just come on here and give you a magic potion and say this is the guy, because that guy does not exist. Yeah. Everybody thought it was James last night, and he almost got there. I mean, he still posted a pretty good score, relatively speaking, on the slate. And if he doesn't give up that big hit in the 3rd inning or 4th inning or whatever it was, he posted some pretty good strikeout numbers. So, he would have been in the range of the highest scoring pitcher on the night. So I just think you're well positioned if you take a chance on somebody a little bit cheaper. If somebody in that 5, 6, 7K range outscores these 10K guys, or at least, matches them, then you're ahead of the boat because you have more to spend at pitcher than everybody else. So again, it's not pretty. I can see sprinkling in Kelly and Gibson and the like in tournaments. Martinez would probably be my preferred option at a little bit lower ownership. But, really my only strong take here is that you can't play Bueller.
I was reading Cheese's article today, and he brought up, he wrote up Carlos Martinez, and he was, yeah, I mean, I guess he could do good, but I don't plan on having any Carlos Martinez. And then he came back with an aside a little bit later saying, actually, after looking at these other pitchers, Carlos Martinez isn't the worst idea in the world. And so I'm going to be playing some Carlos Martinez, guys like Merrill Kelly, Kyle Gibson. I don't like doing it, but I am going to play some of them. And of course, we talk about the cheaper guys, Patrick Sandoval, Josh Lindblom, even Zach Davies. Zach Davies, one of the safer options on this slate. I think you can play any of these guys and be okay. And, this is another one of those slates like we had last night, where pitching is very unlikely to win it for you. It can lose it for you if you roster a guy like Fultonevich. It can lose it for you if you roster a guy like Josh James at 70% ownership. But from a standpoint of, you're going to get a 40-point outing from one of these guys, it ain't going to happen. And so cards, like you kind of said, mix and match them. Don't get too cute. Hope you don't get blown up.
Yeah, and, that's why Davies is more relevant than he would normally be on a slate with 10 games. I mean, you're normally not going to play an $8,000 Zach Davies, but who are you going to play? You're going to play Mengden. I mean, Framber Valdez gets a good number of ground balls, but against the Dodgers, it's just an ugly pitching slate, which leads me back to why I'll just take the path of least resistance and take a cheap guy, and Lindblom will probably be the guy that I have the most overweight on compared to the field.
Yep, and don't forget, you can leave salary on the table. If you end up rostering Patrick Sandoval and Josh Lindblom, you are not required to fill up that $50,000 salary cap on DraftKings or the $60,000 salary cap on FanDuel. This is another one of those slates like we talked about last night. Do not be afraid to leave money on the table when you're building your lineup. Let's talk some offenses because, once again, we're going to have, Boston, JD Martinez is going to be chalk. I'm a little bit surprised we don't have higher ownership on these Boston guys. Did you think that 4 days into the season, we'd be seeing chalk Kansas City Royals Day?
Well, after last night, I guess there's no doubt. I mean, look, they're facing a bad team with a bad pitching staff that's throwing out a Rule 5 pick tonight. It's, and they're cheap too. I mean, on DK, they're all under $4,000. Whit Merrifield's the most expensive at $3,800. So when we got that kind of matchup, you got a pretty high team total. The total in that game is 11. It should be a pretty close game. And you're facing a Rule 5 guy and, an underwhelming bullpen. Well, now you see why everybody's going to roster Merrifield and Soler and Sal Perez on DK where you need a catcher. They're cheap and they have a good matchup.
Yeah, and again, you're not going to feel great about rostering, though the total is 11 in there. I mean, is it a little bit weird to you? And I always love this spot because the Royals are going to be 15, 20% owned. Meanwhile, they are a pick'em against the Tigers, and the Tigers aren't going to be owned at all. Like, to me, instead of the Royals, I'd much rather play the Tigers, play some – and I understand that these guys aren't great. Some C.J. Cron, some Christian Stewart, Jonathan Scope. Like, I would rather play the Tigers than the Royals. Am I going crazy here?
In terms of DFS based on ownership,
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the ownership percentages if you're playing tournaments. In this is a good parallel to last night. And if you played on DraftKings last night, right, the Mets were facing Boston and Boston basically made it a bullpen game. Osich or somebody started, and then they used Zach Godley in long relief. And then the Mets were starting former Cardinal rookie superstar Michael Wacha, and the Red Sox were all cheap on DraftKings. Like Benintendi was 3,700, JD Martinez, relatively speaking, was like 4,700, and all the Mets, like Ahmed Rosario was 5K, and Pete Alonso was 5,600, and McNeil was 5,500. And so what everybody do? Well, everybody played Boston because Boston was cheaper and they're facing Michael Wacha, and Michael Wacha stinks. But then what happened? Alonso hit a 2-run homer. The Mets Conforto hit a 2-run homer. The Mets hit, 3 or 4 home runs and won the game. So a lot of times, especially now, salary matters less than ownership does in some of these cases, because normally you'd say, well, I need to save that salary so that I can spend up on pitching. But what's the point of spending up on pitching right now when none of the pitchers are going deep into the game? So in that case, I tend to look at ownership a little bit more. And this is the same case. A lot of those bigger Detroit bats are more expensive. Why play Nico Goodrum at 4,200 when I can play Merrifield on the other side at 3,800? Different positions, but that's the argument. Well, Merrifield's going to be 20% owned and Goodrum's going to be 3% owned. And, Sal Perez is going to be 30% owned. So if you like the game to shoot out, I don't mind grabbing some exposure to some of those Detroit guys at, basically everybody at 5% owned or less.
Yeah, and, if you want to play the KC guys with the Detroit guys, I think that's perfectly fine. If you want to game stack this up, nobody's going to be doing that. And if the hitting conditions are good for Kansas City, people are going to cite that. Well, they're good for Detroit too. And though you might not feel as comfortable rostering these Detroit guys, you didn't feel comfortable rostering Kansas City guys either yesterday, and they went absolutely bonkers. The other big total game we have, the Mets at Boston again. It's David Peterson, Matt Hall, a couple of trash lefties, 11.5 run total. Some rain expected here, but nothing that should mess with the game. When I look at these guys, I don't care which side you take. I think they're both fine. We're going to see, I'm just taking a look. It looks like we're going to see a little bit more ownership on the Mets, which is funny after last night. It was all in Boston. But, I mean, Jose Peraza leading off. If you're playing cash games, he's one of the first guys in your cash game lineup with 2.6K over on DraftKings. But in tournaments, I mean, guys like JD Martinez, yeah, he's going to be popular. I think he's fine. Kevin Pillar has always been okay against lefties. Michael Chavis, he's cheap, 2.7K hitting sixth. I think a lot of these Boston bats are in play, as are the Mets. Do you have a lean here?
I mean, I think I'd lean towards Boston just because, the public sentiment is trending the other way. You mentioned some trash lefties on the mound. So obviously JD Martinez, Bogarts, Peraza leading off. I mean, I think you pick your spots just because some of those guys have such good matchups. They're cheap. Chavis at 2,700 on DraftKings is fine too. You can run it back with somebody from the Mets, but just a little uncomfortable paying 5.3K for Jeff McNeil at almost 20% ownership. That just doesn't feel right. No offense to Jeff McNeil. But
big fan of the show. He's probably listening. I'm upset right now.
I don't know that full stacking the Mets is high on my priority list tonight, simply because you have a lot of other teams with similar run expectations, with lower ownership. I mean, there's 6 or 7 teams with projected run totals of like 4.7 or higher. So not going to fault you if you do stack the Mets, but they're expensive. They're going to be a little bit chalky. And if I'm doing that, I'd rather even stack Houston, given their offense, with Buehler only pitching a few innings for the Dodgers, and nobody's going to be doing that. So don't be afraid to get a little bit different.
You mentioned Houston. I think it's a really good tournament stack because anytime you can get a team like Houston with all the talent in the world, even if they're not banging on trash cans, they're still okay at hitting the baseball. You're going to get Alex Bregman at 5%. And again, you're not excited to do it against Walker Buehler, but like we've talked about, he ain't going more than 3 innings. So Bregman, Altuve, Springer, Brantley, it is very rare to see this Houston offense at 1 to 5%. And you look at Altuve at 8%, Springer 6%, everybody else is under 5%. I think you make a really good point here. And the other side of this game, it's going to get a little bit more ownership, but I'm still a little bit surprised to see it as low as it is because Framber Valdez, I know he's a guy that gets a ton of ground balls, but it's not like we're talking about an all-star starter here. It's not like we're saying, you can't play the Dodgers because of Framber Valdez. That's not a real sentence that you should be saying. So I think this game as a whole is going to go a little bit overlooked. And I kind of think that's a mistake because you've got 2 of the absolute best offenses in the league.
Yeah. I mean, you got great offenses and guys that people aren't going to target tonight. So I like it. I know that there's some pinch hit risk for some of the guys in the Dodgers lineup. I mean, Chris Taylor's hitting 5th, but righty comes in later in the game. You probably see Jock Peterson come in there, but it's just a spot where you're going to see all these guys on these 2 offenses at lower ownership than you otherwise would. So don't mind this as a tournament stack as well.
I'm a little disappointed that Kiki Hernandez is hitting 8th. I thought for sure this was going to be a Kiki Hernandez. It's 5th or 6th night, and I was going to plug and play him everywhere at 3K over on draft. It's not the case, though. We got to talk about the Angels, too, because this is a stack that I've got a ton of interest in. Anthony Rendon expected back tonight. Mike Trout, of course, anytime against anybody, but especially against the lefty, especially against the bad lefty is in play. Justin Upson against the lefty I have interest in. Shohei Ohtani, lefty-on-lefty matchup, but nobody's going to play Ohtani, which seems like a mistake. I feel like these Angels are going to be, maybe outside of Trout, a little bit overlooked in against Justice Sheffield, who's not a good lefty, and against the bad bullpen. I think the Angels are real interesting.
Yeah, and their team total is pretty high as well. Obviously, people will play Trout, particularly if they have their salary available, if they're spending up a pitcher. So, if they're saving salary at pitchers. So then, you've got the salary to spend on a 6K Mike Trout. It's risky, but doing an Angel stacks without Mike Trout could be a way to get a little bit weird in a super top heavy tournament tonight. If you want to do that, obviously, it takes some stones to do an Angel stack without Mike Trout, but throwing that out there.
I wouldn't do that. I'm not doing that.
No.
No. I'll save that for all.
If you were doing 50 Angel stacks, you wouldn't make a couple of them without Mike Trout.
If I would probably have 45 with Mike Trout on it. So okay.
Okay, so then you have 5 without Mike Trout.
I have 5 losers for sure.
5 donations.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, don't go nuts with that. Don't go 100 lineups with no Mike Trout if you're playing the Angels. The most likely scenario, if the Angels are scoring a bunch of runs, is that he has a hand in that in some fashion. So, got to keep an eye out for the lineup. I don't think we have that one yet, at least not the last time I had refreshed. So to make sure that Rendon is back, make sure Ohtani's in there. Since he just pitched, didn't record an out, but did pitch a couple days ago. Put the.
I thought for sure the day after he didn't record an out. I played him so much at DFS. I thought for sure he was going to have a few bleep you bombs, and it did not work out. Okay, we got a little bit of news cards, and nothing Corona related, so we're okay. How many pitches would Walker Buehler be allowed to throw before you would want to play it?
I mean, at 11,000.
Remember the context of the slate. There's nobody else good.
Yeah, well, exactly. At least 70.
Okay, well, the Dodgers have announced that Walker Buehler is going to be on a 75 pitch limit.
So it's the Dodgers, so you have to take that number and then divide by 6 and multiply by 4, and then take the square root of that. No, it's all relative. This maybe limits my desire to stack Houston.
Yes, I would agree.
A little bit. But Buehler's still the most expensive pitcher on the slate. If he finishes the fourth inning at 66 pitches, they're not bringing him back out, even though he's not at 75.
They might.
No, they're not. They're not. The Dodgers are not doing that. So I don't know. I don't want to just call BS on the 75 being the number. But if the over under is 71.5, I'm going to say that he ends up under that.
It's true. We have made mistakes about trusting Dave Roberts before. We should be careful when we're talking about doing it this time. Can he get 5? I mean, this Astros team, look, they haven't been great to start the season. They're not cheating this year, which makes a difference. Could we get 5 innings with 75 pitches? If we get 5 innings of Walker Buehler tonight, man, I want him.
Yeah, I just don't think you're going to.
You look so uncomfortable right now.
What's that?
You look so uncomfortable.
Well, part of the reason I look uncomfortable, I just saw a tweet that says Bob Nightingale of USA Today tells 93.7 The Fan radio station that the Marlins outbreak started because when they were playing an exhibition game in Atlanta, the Miami players left their hotel in Atlanta to go out and have a good time. Which, if true,
they got that Gold Club.
They met up with Lou Williams. And this just goes to, I don't mean to derail the show, but the pitching's so bad tonight anyways, that without the bubble concept, things like this are going to happen. If you're expecting teams to play football, I think it was Devin McCourty that came out and said, hey, I've got photos and videos of guys at nightclubs and bars and, football players doing it. And you see how this outbreak goes that quickly through the Marlins. Well, imagine a more contact-oriented sport like football. Baseball is going to be in jeopardy if what happens with the Marlins happens with any other team.
One more team is going to be all at stake.
One more team. It's just going to derail the schedule so much that it's going to be impossible. And all it takes is one person to be stupid and then hang out with 2 or 3 others on the team, and then, off you go. So I don't know. It's probably going to make its rounds through the news wires tonight, whether he's not the most reliable reporter at times, but
I assume if Bob Nightingale reported it, he was the one out at the clubs in Atlanta, and it definitely was not the Miami Marlins.
We'll find out.
Just guys, stay home. Stop it. Don't go out to the clubs. You do not need to do that. It's just especially when we're trying to get sports back. Your point about football, though, I'm not so sure we're getting football, and it's going to break my heart because it's every time I try and sit down to start preparing for football, I just get sad and move on to something else, usually food. That's just
I mean, you've been banging the drum at no football for a while. So if there is no football, at least you can say you were right.
I don't want to be right. I would love to be wrong on this. I have no desire to say, look, I told you we were going to have football. No, I don't want to be right on here.
I'm just trying to give you a consolation prize.
I don't need a consolation prize. I need sports. A few in the chat want to know about some Rocky stacks tonight. Daniel Mangans. He's one of these guys I don't play and I don't pick on. Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, I suppose you can always play him. They're probably not going to be in my player pool. Are you messing with the Rockies at all?
I don't hate that game as one that's a little bit more off the radar tonight. So if you're building a bunch of GPP lineups and you're putting in a $3 contest that's top heavy or a $10, $15, I'll probably stack up that game a little bit. Yeah, okay. I don't hate it.
Yeah, and I feel a little silly because I was talking about the Dodgers and I don't care if it's a ground ball pitcher. I still like that offense. Whereas right here, I'm like, the Rockies are facing a ground ball pitcher. I'm not that excited. Tony Senzatella on the other side with the A's. I don't know. The A's are one of these teams that I feel like we should just stack every night. It's a little bit like the Twins, a little bit like the Yankees, a little bit like the Dodgers. But the A's are always the lower owned of that crew, and you never know who it's going to be. It could be Marcus Semien, Matt Chapman, Matt Olson. Mark Canha the other night crushed it. Chris Davis, I don't know, has he been striking out a lot lately still? I haven't been paying much attention to Chris Davis.
Chris Davis with a K or Chris Davis with
a C? With a K. They're both striking out a lot. It doesn't matter. Yeah, the answer is yes.
Chris Davis with a C is perpetually striking out, except they aren't right now because the Orioles haven't been allowed to play. Let me see what his stat line is here if I can learn to type. So
I'm just like the A's is they're one of these teams that I'm not in love with tonight, but you should probably have a little bit of exposure if you're multi-entering. If I'm single entering, probably not the team I'm going to play, but as far as multi-entering goes, I sort of like the A's.
Yeah, he's hitless so far with 5 Ks in 3 games. So
boy, that's about right.
But the home run is coming. That'll be the first hit. So someday. I don't hate that game in tournaments. It's overlooked. You've got a total of 9.5. It's not if that game wasn't. It's just funny if that game was in Coors. If it was the Rockies home opener, the ownership percentage would be like 10x or 8x what it is right now. So, if you're getting a little bit different, if you want to get away from the Red Sox, the Mets, Kansas City, those popular teams tonight, I don't mind that game.
QQ from Daniel Patterson. He wants to know: would you play Rendon after coming back from his injury and making his debut? I have no problem with Anthony Rendon tonight. None.
Yeah, I think if they're playing him, he's good to go. So yeah. I don't see any reason why you need to avoid Rendon.
You mean they're not going to invest $300 million in a guy, then rush him back during a shortened season?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. But we don't have their lineup yet. So again, we got to make sure that he's in there. And I haven't seen whether they plan to DH him tonight or whether they plan to let him play the field. I don't know. But
again, if they DH him, that means our boy Albert's going to be in the field
or not playing. Yeah. So the Angels have a standby list for DHs, which, by the way, for our Cardinals, what a bad luck change of ruling right after they got rid of Jose Martinez to have the DH in the National League. As I watched him hit a home run out of the cleanup spot for Tampa last night. So I digress a little, but it remains to be seen if Rendon is confirmed in there. But if he's in there tonight, you got to presume he's good to
go. The question I'm showing on the screen, are the green numbers to the right of their salaries, their projections? Yes, those are the RotoGrinders projections. We got a lot of questions about our Cardinals tonight. They're underdogs in Minnesota against Homer Bailey. You can always stack against Homer Bailey. Never a bad idea. First, Paul Goldschmidt, he's been playing well. I don't expect them to be popular. They're not at the top of my list, but they're in a handful of teams that are just fine as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, the Cardinals have actually hit Homer Bailey well during his career. His numbers with the Reds against the Cardinals were not good. Obviously, different roster. But the Cardinals do have a pretty extensive library of Homer Bailey materials because he faced them so much as a member of the Reds. So agreed. They're not at the top of my list either. I actually like the under in this game. I think 10.5 is a pretty big number with Martinez pitching for the Cardinals. Both of these teams have competent enough bullpens, and they had the day off yesterday, so all their good arms should be ready to go. I think that the under in that game is a solid bet. So
we got to talk about your sharp side.
That's not it. Although I might retroactively change my mind and decide that is it, because the bet that I selected earlier was Houston plus 115 against the Dodgers.
No.
And I did that kind of under the assumption that Buehler would not be pitching more than 3 or 4 innings for the Dodgers. Now, maybe he gets to go a little bit longer. I still like Houston. I think there's some value in them being a home underdog. I don't think only in the most extreme of cases should that team ever be a home underdog. So I still don't mind Houston, but given the Buehler news that he might be stretched out just a little bit more, I still don't completely buy it. But assuming that happens, maybe I will change my pick to the under in the Cardinals game, which I actually think I am going to bet tonight. So, under 10 in the Cardinals Twins game, maybe if you get it at 10.5. I think I saw it 10.5 earlier in some places. So that would be my new pick if you're too afraid of Buehler going a little bit longer.
In my lock of the day was taking the under in the Padres Giants game. I understand that there might be pitch concern issues, but to me, this is going to be one of those games that ends 3-2 or 4-2, and I just don't have a lot of interest from an offensive standpoint. Anytime I can take the under in the Giants Park, I'm going to do it. And I think Zach Davies throws well tonight. He's actually going to be one of my higher-owned pitchers, and that is awfully a depressing sentence to say. That's where we were at on this Tuesday. Couple more questions. Yelich or JD Martinez? Okay, Herbert, you got to let me know. Is this a tournament? Who is your stack? We talked about this yesterday a little bit, and you guys got to understand, the question if it's a 1v1 is always, and I mean always, who does your team correlate with? If you've got a lot of Red Sox, you play JD Martinez. If you got a lot of Brewers, you play Christian Yelich. That's just how it is. If you're, looking for a one-off, look, I think JD is the most likely guy to do well. He's also going to be about 3 times as owned as Christian Yelich. So I'm going to roll Christian Yelich because I think the projections are close enough.
Yeah, I mean, don't be scared off of the lefty-lefty matchup with Yelich at all. He's fine. Martinez is going to be chalky, and if you're rolling any kind of safe contest or a 3-man or something like that, I think you play JD Martinez. But Yelich always has that 2 home run upside, and he won't be highly owned because people get scared off with lefty-lefty, even though it's a bad lefty, and the park factor as well. I mean, Pittsburgh not a great park to hit, but Yelich can hit him out of anywhere.
Yeah, and he said that he was stacking both Milwaukee and Boston, and to me, Boston can get there without JD Martinez crushing. There are enough other names with the Boston Red Sox offense, or you could have Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts, Michael Chavis all hit dongs, and that's how you get there. It's tough for Milwaukee to get there. Christian Yelich is a crushing. So to me, it's definitely Yelich in that as well. Did you see Britt Devine in the chat helping you out?
I did not.
He says he likes
the Cardinals. He's been on the He was on the Cardinals on Sunday too, and they lost. So maybe that's Britt's fault.
Well, I was gonna ask you about your sports betting with Britt. How he just he's finally giving back to you instead of you having to give him the golf picks.
All the golf winners. We've got 2 winners the last 5 weeks in golf, but Britt didn't bet the first one.
I was in that room. He asked you for the picks, and he didn't bet it.
We got one back a few weeks ago, but we do have some lineups. Our old man Pujols is in the field tonight.
Woo!
And Rendon is in the lineup, but Rendon's also in the field, so he is playing third. They've got Ohtani DHing tonight. Otherwise, that lineup is about what you would expect from the Angels. They've shifted batting order positions around a little bit with Rendon back. He's sitting third. Ohtani's sitting fifth. They moved La Stella down to seventh. So that's the Angels lineup. A's lineup is also out, which basically contains a whole lot of not many changes. They do have their backup catcher in there tonight. And those are a couple of the West Coast lineups that we've gotten in the last 10 minutes.
Had you ever heard of Austin Allen before this very moment?
No, I had not.
Okay, I just
He
wanted
is
to
now
make
the
sure.
backup catcher for the A's, so he's going to go in some A's stacks. So welcome to the team.
Yeah, well, welcome aboard, buddy. Hope you're getting an Austin Allen jersey after tonight. You mentioned the Angels with Rendon being in there. They are a really, really easy team to stack because David Fletcher at the top is incredibly cheap. I talked earlier about Jose Peraza in cash games. I think David Fletcher's another one of those guys. If you're playing cash, you're throwing him in there leading off against Justice Sheffield, righty and lefty matchup for only 3.2K. You obviously are going to throw Trout and Rendon in there. And then any of these other guys, I don't even hate throwing Albert Pujols in a stack. Isn't it a little disrespectful how much Angels fans hate Albert Pujols?
I mean, you didn't have him for the best 10 years of his career, and now you're paying him buku dollars for a guy that can barely run down to first base. Like, is it disrespectful from a Cardinal fan perspective? We're a little biased. But I'm trying to think of a parallel, like, a team that I like that got somebody on the downside of their career. But it's hard.
Nick Foles? Is that one? Joe Flacco?
I mean, it's not to the extent of Poole. You got a Hall of Famer that basically has fallen off a cliff. But everybody saw this coming. Like, it was so obvious. His foot problem started when he still played for the Cardinals.
And everybody in St. Louis knew he was older than
right. Yeah, you had the whole age issue, and and the fact that he already played for a dozen years, and you're giving him how much money? Like, it was sad to see him go as a Cardinal fan, but it was so obvious that it would have been detrimental to the franchise to pay to keep him. And it is what it is. It's a terrible deal for the Angels, and it worked out for the Cardinals. And it's sports. It sucks to see your favorite players go to another team, but it's business.
Okay, last question. Your favorite pitcher tonight? Your favorite tournament pitcher tonight? It's not Walker Buehler anymore, is it?
I mean, I think Carlos Martinez is on the list. I think Lindblom is on the list. I think it would be one of those two guys, depending on the salary that you have available.
All right, we got to jump off here. For you premium members, we've got Roth, Cardi, and Tuttle coming up on crunch time. Locke is here in about 30 minutes. So get those lineups in, guys. I know Cards and myself, we have to go build some lineups now. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for watching. You've been watching Grinders Live on RotoGrinders. We'll catch y'all later. Peace.